We do find ourselves in the second Sunday of Lent, second season of Lent, the second Sunday in Lent. It's always one of those things. I think it's important to be reminded that in each Sunday and every Sunday is a little bit of Easter. The season of Lent really is on Monday through Saturday, and then every Sunday is a remembrance and a reminder of the resurrection and the goodness of the life of Christ and the good news that comes even in the midst of the dark season of Lent. It's one of those things you can, people give up, take on, add additional activities to their lives during the season of Lent. And then if it's something like, chocolate, and you give it up for Saturday or Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday you can have some. It's a little bit of a reprieve. It's the goodness, and it's a remembering of the resurrection, because every Sunday is always a little bit of Easter. That's one of the things that in my own life and mind, I always have struggled with Lent, especially when we get really particular in the worship circles and we take out the amens and hallelujahs during the season of Lent because of the penitent nature of Lent. And yet at the same time, we always are people of the resurrection. So we get so obsessed with leaving things out and taking things away that we miss the power and the goodness of the glory. It's kind of the same thing in this text from Mark. It's Jesus, when he tells that he must go and be before the chief priest and the scribes and the Pharisees, the chief priest, scribes, and elders, not the Pharisees, aren't mentioned. But when he goes before them and says that they'll all reject him, and then he'll be put to death, and then rise in 3 days. And Peter takes him aside and says, but you're such a good person, and you're so great, and you're wonderful, and you're the very Son of God. I don't exactly know what Peter said to Jesus, but he began to get after him about, I think, this whole being rejected by the scribes and the priests and the leaders, the elders. I really think that's probably what it was. We knew this can't happen. And especially the whole part about being put to death. He didn't want that to happen. So he's probably taking that as the emphasis from Jesus' message, and yet somehow misses that part about the promise to rise in 3 days. Yeah, you see, we kind of focus on the worst of the situation and fail to look for what's fully being revealed in this teaching. Jesus is teaching on a different level, and Peter is clinging to the earthly knowledge that he possesses, trying to see through things. I kind of doing a little bit of a study here. People who are wearing glasses in the congregation. This morning I thought about, I wear contacts, you know that, because if I'm not, I'm blind. I'd probably fall off the steps here. But I remember growing up, I think, if I remember correctly, it was 7th grade. And we had an English teacher. I had, bless her heart, I had the same English teacher for 7th grade English and spelling as I did 9th grade English. We didn't have spelling in 9th grade, but I felt sorry for her. And the longer I live, the more I feel sorry for her for having me twice. And anyway, that's enough of that. But anyway, we were given the assigned seats. You know how 7th graders are. And we had just moved into the junior high school. Our elementary school was K through 6. And so we were the peons on the junior high campus. And we walked in, and I'm pretty sure it was 6th and 7th period at the end of the day that we had Miss Tillery. She was such a saint. She had me twice. Did I tell you that? Bless her heart. But Miss Tillery, she assigned seats, and I remember that 7th grade. She was always so funny. She said, if you ever hear people talk about the crazy lady in B building, she said, that's me. She said, I will tell you that, and don't mess with me. You don't want to be on the receiving end. She had one of those, it was real popular back in the day, those petrified rocks that were ink holder, pen holders. You remember that, when that was real popular kind of thing? Real decorative. Well, she had one, except she didn't hold her pen in it. She used it as a gavel on her desk. She didn't shout. She just banged that petrified piece of rock all the time if we got misbehaving. She tried to teach me English. I didn't do too good in that last sentence. But she would tell us about that kind of thing. And I remember that 7th grade, we went in there and we were given assigned seats in the room. Mine was in the back of the classroom. And then she told us, she says, well, our books are on back order. We don't have any English books for our semester. She says, don't worry about it. And she said, you see that table over there? And it was a table about the size of that piano. She says, I have enough worksheets for us for the first half of the year. It was about this thick. And, they ration papers as teachers, and, you run out of paper and those things. She didn't mind. She just went ahead and made all of her copies on the first day of first semester before everybody else came back to campus. But anyway, she said, don't worry about it. You're fine. You're going to be good. And by this point, I'm in the back of the room in my assigned seat, and she starts writing stuff on the board, and I don't read it clearly. And I strain and I struggle. Said something about it to Mom and Dad, and of course we had to go to the eye doctor. And guess what? I needed glasses. And I will never forget when we first put those glasses on, there was eye doctor up in Rural Hall, and there was an eye doctor, and they had a nice window there where you put your glasses and contacts in and those kind of things. And so they took me in to adjust my glasses once they came in. And I'll never forget when I put them on my face, looking across the street and realizing that the church across the street had mortar between the bricks. And those leaves on the trees, well, they just weren't one big blob up in the sky. I don't know how I thought the little leaves got onto the ground and big trees were just one big blob of green, but it never made sense. I never worried about it. I never thought about it. But I remember seeing so clearly with those glasses on. And I've got to take these off because I've got my contacts in and I'm having a real headache. But the clearness of seeing with these lenses on made such a difference. To be able to focus and to understand what was laying out there way in the distance. It's powerful for my life. I mean, it's been a long time since 30 plus years, and I remember the moment. So amazing. When my prescription had helped me see, was focused in, fitted properly, that the grand became particular. I don't know, I guess there's a part of that in faith. There's a part of us that, I'll get it right when I understand it all. Sometimes we haven't had communion for far too long, partly because I think that, for what we'll have to look like in an operating room to go to have communion together right now, but we're getting there. We'll have it. It misses the point of being in community. But when some folks are like, I'm just not going to participate in communion, you've got to be perfect to participate in communion. Well, if you wait to get perfect, you're never going to do anything. It's kind of like faith, when it talks about, I think people ought to be able to make their own decision when they are baptized versus being baptized as an infant. I think they need to understand what's going on. And if we wait till we understand what's going on, I'm not sure any of us will ever be baptized. The magnitude and the grandeur of our faith is so powerful, so amazing. I was thinking about that this morning. We've got butterflies on the way. We do that for Easter. If you want one, let me know. I've not had many reservations yet. I'm going to have a lot of homeless butterflies because I'm going to get some just for myself this year. But the very idea of those butterflies, when they do their thing, they eat their little munchie, and then they go into a cocoon, and for all pretense and purposes, look dead as a doornail. And yet somehow they emerge from this skinny little weird-looking worm into a beautiful, graceful butterfly that floats across the sky. I love that image of the butterfly as part of our faith. It's one of the rock, a symbol of the resurrection. I guess if I were to redo some of these windows, I would probably put a butterfly in there. I think we miss that. We need it. I love that our little library out front has a butterfly on it. Not only are people getting books out of there, but now they've turned into kind of a food repository and dispensary. There's a symbol of the power of the resurrection. when they get seen right. Just those little butterflies. How in the world did they figure out that that was what they were supposed to do? To be able to go into a cocoon and come out alive, fly. I think it has something to do with those lenses of faith. I think it has something to do with understanding and trusting. I also think it has something to do with grace working in our lives. You knew I was probably going to get around to saying something about grace and a story about fullness and understanding of God. That's really what happens. I mean, we understand it, and it's partly what reveals God to us, His grace, God's gift to us. Now, there's a human component in that as well. We have to be willing. We have to allow our free will. We have to be able to open our lives and our hearts and our minds to God's grace. God offers it to us, but we've also got to respond as people and individuals. But yet, we wouldn't have that response without God's grace. It's not something that we can obtain, we can understand with the knowledge of our mind we can gain. It's only through God's giving of that grace that we become to know that grace and to understand it fully, or as fully as humanly possible, which begins to transform our lives and to change it into the fullness of who God created us to be as God's people. Sometimes I think maybe perhaps this year, not only is Lent a time for us to find hope and to reflect, but it's also a time for us to hear again the message of resurrection, even in the midst of this Lent process. For waiting, for refocusing our lives and our will and our hopes and our dreams on the thing that God hopes for. The constant reminders of the kingdom of God at work in the world. This is one of those years we need to hear that. It's not a year to give up. It's not a time to throw our hands up and quit. It's a time to double our efforts, to focus our attention not only on our wants and our desires, but God's work in the world to offer us the fullness of life through the resurrection's power. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who was, who is, and who is to come. Amen.